Rookie out of Baylor, number 2 in that beautiful seafoam green jersey. Committing the foul, Sophie Cunningham.
One shirt, one player, one moment that shattered the illusion of control. Sophie Cunningham didn't just walk into an arena, she walked into a fault line the league didn't know was about to break. She knew the cameras were waiting. She knew the message would travel faster than any press release, and she knew exactly what it meant. So when that red and white shirt hit timelines across America, the question wasn't why did she do it? It was why did it work so well?
Break is here as J.C. Sheldon goes right after Sophie Cunningham. It was a hard foul, no question.
Because what happens when a league tries to silence a player and the public makes her unstoppable instead? What happens when a fine turns into a movement and a so-called distraction turns into $800,000 in a single day? This isn't a viral stunt or a merch story. It's a power struggle playing out in real time. And the most unsettling part for the WNBA isn't what Sophie Cunningham said, it's what she revealed. The foul that started everything. To understand how we arrived at this explosive moment, we need to rewind to a game against the Connecticut Sun that changed everything. Sophie Cunningham was playing her usual role, bringing energy off the bench, defending hard, doing all the little things that do not show up in highlight reels but absolutely win basketball games. Then it happened. She took a hit directly to the head. Clear contact, obvious foul, the kind of play that should result in an immediate whistle and potentially a flagrant review. The referees saw it. Everyone in the arena saw it. The cameras captured it from multiple angles. And somehow, impossibly, no whistle came. Play continued as if nothing had happened. But that was only the beginning. Minutes later, Sophie found herself on the receiving end of what can only be described as a neck grab. Another obvious foul. Another moment where any reasonable official would stop play and assess the situation. Another complete failure by the referees to protect a player from unnecessary physical contact.
Sophie Cunningham getting in on the action as she knocks down her first triple.
Again, nothing. No call. No acknowledgement. Just silence from the officials who are supposed to ensure player safety. The frustration building inside Sophie Cunningham at that point must have been overwhelming. She had just been hit in the head and grabbed by the neck in the span of a few minutes. And the people responsible for enforcing the rules had simply looked the other way both times. After the game, Sophie and Caitlin Clark both approached the referees to discuss what had happened. What followed was captured on camera and spread across social media like wildfire. The referee would not even look at them. He kept turning away, physically avoiding eye contact while two players tried to have a professional conversation about calls that had directly impacted the game and their safety. Sophie was literally tapping on his arm trying to get his attention, and he refused to acknowledge her existence. Anyone who has watched professional basketball for any length of time knows that. Players and referees communicate constantly. They build relationships over years of games. They discuss calls respectfully, even when they disagree. But this referee treated Sophie and Caitlin like they were invisible, like their concerns were so beneath him that he could not be bothered to offer even basic professional courtesy. The tick-tock that went nuclear. Sophie Cunningham had seen enough. She had taken the hits. She had watched the officials ignore blatant fouls. She had been dismissed like her safety did not matter. And unlike so many players who swallow their frustration and move on because they fear league punishment, Sophie decided she was done being silent. She opened TikTok and recorded a video that would change everything. In that clip, she absolutely roasted the referees, calling them slow, useless, and blind. She did not hold back. She did not use diplomatic language or carefully worded statements designed to avoid controversy. She said exactly what millions of fans were.
And if you ask the players, though, Sophie Cunningham has been speaking out about this. This is not anything about Caitlin Clark. Obviously, they're better with her.
Already thinking what players across the league were whispering to each other in private. What everyone in women's basketball knew, but nobody with a platform was willing to say out loud. The video exploded. Within minutes, it had hundreds of thousands of views. Within hours, it had crossed 1 million. The comments section became absolute chaos in the best possible way. Fans who had been frustrated with WNBA officiating for years finally had someone with a platform validating their concerns. They were not crazy, they were not imagining things. A professional player was confirming what they had been seeing with their own eyes, and she was doing it with the kind of fearless honesty that makes content go viral. 1.3 million views and counting, shares spreading across every social media platform, sports media picking up the story and running segments about Sophie's criticism. The WNBA had a full-blown public relations situation on their hands, and they had absolutely no idea how to handle it. Here is where the league made its first catastrophic mistake. Instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, there were legitimate concerns about officiating that deserved attention, the WNBA slapped Sophie Cunningham with a $5,000 fine. Their strategy was transparent. Punish the player who spoke out. Send a message to everyone else that criticism will not be tolerated. Make an example of Sophie so that no other athlete dares to publicly question the league's operations. It was a classic corporate playbook move, the kind of heavy-handed response that organizations have been using to silence employees and contractors for generations. The only problem was that they completely misread who they were dealing with and how the public would react. The Arby's moment. Sophie Cunningham looked at that $5,000 fine and she laughed. Literally laughed. Not a nervous chuckle or a forced smile for the cameras. Genuine laughter at the absurdity of a league, trying to punish her for telling the truth about officiating that everyone could see was problematic. But Sophie was not content to simply laugh off the fine and move on. She had a plan.
If the WNBA screws you, you'll find a plan B. Or what's it called?
Not Plan B, Project B.
And that plan was about to become the greatest marketing moment in women's sports history. On her next game night, Sophie walked into the arena wearing a t-shirt that said, "Hot girls eat Arby's." It was bold, it was funny, it was completely unexpected, and it was absolutely brilliant. The internet exploded the moment those images hit social media. Within minutes, the Arby shirt was trending across multiple platforms. Comments flooded in calling Sophie iconic, a marketing genius, an absolute legend. The juxtaposition was perfect. The league had just fined her for speaking her mind, tried to send a message that players should stay quiet and compliant, and Sophie responded by walking into their building wearing a fast food restaurant t-shirt that would generate more attention than any official WNBA marketing campaign had managed all season. She turned their punishment into her platform. She transformed their attempt at control into her moment of rebellion. And she did it all with a smile on her face that said she knew exactly what she was doing. Arby's official social media account immediately recognized the opportunity and called Sophie an unapologetic queen. The brand engagement was off the charts. Suddenly, a fast food company was getting more positive attention from women's basketball fans than the league itself. The shirts started selling out across the country. Within hours, they were gone in every state. The next day, the numbers came in.
And this comes days after Sophie Cunningham tweeted out this after the second one was thrown onto a court.
And they were absolutely staggering. 800,000 units sold. Millions of dollars in revenue generated by one player, one shirt, one moment of authentic rebellion. And here is the part that must have made WNBA executives physically ill. None of that money went to the league. Not a single dollar. Sophie Cunningham had just demonstrated in the most public way possible that players can generate massive commercial value completely independent of the organization that supposedly employs them. The numbers do not lie. The aftermath of the Arby's moment produced numbers that tell a story the WNBA desperately wishes it could rewrite. Sophie Cunningham's TikTok following exploded from around 300,000 followers to over 1.7 million in a matter of days. That kind of growth does not happen through careful brand building or strategic content calendars. It happens when someone captures the public imagination by being authentically themselves at exactly the right moment. Sophie had become more than a basketball player. She had become a symbol of resistance against corporate control, and people could not get enough of her. But here is the statistic that should terrify WNBA leadership more than any other. Sophie Cunningham's jersey sales surpassed Caitlin Clark's. Let that sink in for a moment. Caitlin Clark is arguably the most popular, most marketable, most talked about player in the history of women's basketball.
Clark! She's possessed.
Here comes Clark. How will she go for history?
She single-handedly drove record television ratings. She sold out arenas across the country. She brought millions of new fans to the sport who had never watched a WNBA game before in their lives. And Sophie Cunningham, a role player off the bench known primarily for her energy and toughness, outsold her in jersey sales. Not because Sophie is a better basketball player. Everyone knows she is not. But because Sophie did something Caitlin could not do. She stood up publicly, took the punishment, and turned it into triumph. The connection to Caitlin Clark made this story even more powerful. Fans perceive Sophie as Caitlin's enforcer, the teammate willing to take hits and dish them out to protect the league's biggest star. When Sophie posted that TikTok criticizing the refs, she was not just speaking for herself. She was speaking for every time Caitlin had been fouled hard without a call. She was speaking for every fan who had watched their favorite player get targeted by physical defense while officials looked the other way. She was speaking for everyone who felt like the WNBA was not doing enough to protect the players generating all of its attention and revenue. That narrative, whether completely accurate or somewhat exaggerated, resonated with millions of people who were already frustrated with how the league seemed to be handling its sudden surge in popularity. The wrestling offer and what it means. Just when it seemed like the Sophie Cunningham story could not get any more surreal, Jeannie Buss entered the conversation. For those who do not know, Jeannie Buss is the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, one of the most valuable and prestigious franchises in all of professional sports.
Jeannie Buss will govern and continue to run the Lakers for the next several years.
She also has connections to the world of professional wrestling, and she saw something in Sophie that went far beyond basketball. Jeannie publicly offered Sophie a spot in WOW, Women of Wrestling, calling her the enforcer that women's basketball needed. The message was clear. Sophie had transcended her role as a basketball player and become something much bigger in the cultural conversation. The wrestling offer highlighted something important about what Sophie had accomplished. She had created a persona that existed independent of her basketball statistics. She was no longer just a player on the Indiana Fever roster. She was Sophie Cunningham, defender of Caitlin Clark, enemy of bad officiating, wearer of viral t-shirts, and unapologetic truth-teller. That kind of brand has value far beyond the basketball court, and people with money and platforms were starting to notice. The endorsement opportunities started piling up. Brands that had never shown interest in women's basketball players were suddenly sliding into Sophie's direct messages. The $5,000 fine the league had imposed was looking increasingly irrelevant compared to the opportunities flowing in from every direction. Even Angel Reese, who has had her own complicated relationship with the Caitlin Clark phenomenon, reposted the Arby's content with a fire emoji and a caption suggesting solidarity among players who refused to be silenced. The league's attempt to make Sophie an example of what happens when you speak out had completely backfired. Instead of intimidating other players into silence, it had created a rallying point. Sophie proved that the consequences for authenticity were not career destruction, but rather commercial explosion. She proved that fans were hungry for players willing to say what everyone was thinking. She proved that the old model of quiet compliance was dying, and the WNBA had no idea how to adapt. The league's desperate response. Watching this unfold in real time, WNBA leadership found themselves in an impossible position. They had tried to silence Sophie with a fine, and she had turned it into a viral marketing campaign.
But it was also a season from hell, you know, and hopefully this never happens again.
They had tried to maintain control of the narrative, and she had completely hijacked it with a fast food t-shirt. Every move they made seemed to backfire. Every attempt at authority made them look more out of touch. The league that should have been celebrating unprecedented attention and viewership was instead scrambling to contain a player who had figured out she did not need their permission to build her brand. The response they reportedly considered tells you everything you need to know about how threatened they felt. According to multiple sources, the WNBA began discussing a potential ban on branded clothing altogether. Their answer to Sophie's rebellion was not to address the officiating concerns she had raised. It was not to acknowledge that maybe players had legitimate grievances worth hearing. It was not to adapt their approach to a new era where athletes have direct access to massive audiences through social media. Their answer was more control, more rules, more restrictions on what players could wear and how they could express themselves. It was the exact opposite of what the situation called for, and it demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of why Sophie had connected with fans in the first place. Meanwhile, Sophie continued to pour gasoline on the fire with apparent joy. She posted a story holding an Arby's burger while wearing a gold chain that said 5K Fine Club. She was not just refusing to be silenced. She was actively mocking the league's attempt to punish her. She was showing other players that fines are meaningless when the public is on your side. She was demonstrating that authenticity generates more value than compliance ever could. Rumors started circulating that Arby's wanted Sophie to lead their national advertising campaign with a deal worth $2 million on the table. $2 million for a role player who was making a fraction of that in basketball salary. The economics of women's sports were being rewritten in real time, and Sophie Cunningham was holding the pen. The bigger picture. Here is the truth the WNBA does not want to admit, but can no longer avoid. They created this situation themselves through years of prioritizing control over connection. Instead of improving officiating when players and fans complained, they ignored the criticism and hoped it would go away.
Cunningham has her second personal, and she might pick up a technical foul. She's not.
Instead of listening to stars who had legitimate concerns about how games were being called, they punished anyone who spoke too loudly. Instead of recognizing that social media had fundamentally changed the relationship between athletes and audiences, they clung to an outdated model where the league controlled all messaging and players were expected to stay in their lane. Sophie Cunningham did not create the frustration that fueled her viral moment. She simply gave it a voice and a face. The question now facing women's basketball is whether the league can adapt quickly enough to survive this new reality. Players have discovered that speaking out does not destroy careers, it builds them. Fans have demonstrated that they will reward authenticity with their attention and their money. Sponsors have learned that athletes who generate controversy can be more valuable than athletes who stay quiet. The old rules no longer apply, and the organizations that fail to recognize this will find themselves increasingly irrelevant. Sophie proved that a player can become the biggest story in women's basketball without scoring a single point.
Action, Cunningham, catch, shoot. That is a flawless shot, seamless.
Front court, shape heady.
Simply by being willing to say what everyone else was afraid to say. The Arby's moment was not really about a t-shirt or fast food or even officiating. It was about power and who gets to wield it. For decades, leagues have operated under the assumption that they control their athletes because they control the paychecks. But Sophie demonstrated that in the age of social media, players can build value independent of their employers. They can create audiences that follow them personally rather than following the league. They can generate commercial opportunities that have nothing to do with basketball statistics. The balance of power is shifting, and the WNBA just received the most public possible reminder that the old ways of doing business are rapidly becoming obsolete. Power rarely breaks with noise. It fractures when obedience stops working. What began as a fine meant to restore order instead revealed a deeper fear. A league realizing its players are no longer waiting for permission to speak. Behind closed doors, this wasn't treated as a fashion choice or a protest. It was treated as a warning shot. Because once one athlete proves the system can be challenged without consequence, silence becomes optional for everyone else. So the real question moving forward isn't whether Sophie Cunningham crossed a line. It's whether that line ever had legitimacy to begin with. If stars now understand their voice carries more weight than discipline ever could, what happens the next time the league tries to regain control? Because this moment didn't end a conflict, it exposed one. And the next move may decide who truly holds the power in women's basketball.